everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, September 19th, and I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world. So stay tuned. As always, we're going to start off with our Techstrong News Recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we're going to head over to Alan, where he will sit down with Frank Diana, managing partner and futurist at Tata Consultancy Services, as they talk about how the maturation of AI, IoT, smart sensors, and other tech has pushed digital twins past the tipping point for adoption across every industry, with potential for future applications that will change business and save lives. Alan will then meet with Josh Stella, Chief Architect at Snyk, to hear what Snyk learned from its State of Cloud Security 2022 report, including who owns cloud security and the ROI of shifting left with infrastructure as code security. Then we go to Open Source Summit, where Alan talked with Caleb Brown, Senior Software Engineer at Google, to discuss open source security and the charter for the Google team. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars. Next up, we are airing episode 1 of our new series, Engineering the Change. This series will follow the 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for careers in software engineering. Then, Mitch sits down with Michael Neal, Chief Scientist and co-founder of CloudBees, where Michael will discuss his role in looking at the new and emerging technologies that have potent benefits for new and existing products. And he will share insights into DevOps world. Mitch will then speak to Gopinath Rabala, CTO at OpsMX, to discuss the 3 pillars of DevSecOps. Finally, we will end this broadcast with back-to-back episodes of View with Vizard. In the first, Mike interviews Progress CISO Richard Barretto, as Richard explains why the divide between cybersecurity and the rest of business is finally starting to narrow. In the second episode, Mike interviews 443ID CTO and co-founder Mark Batchelor, as Mark explains how being able to track and analyze social media signals in real time improves cybersecurity. That's what we have coming up for you here on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
Coding is changing the world, making a difference in the world.
We take anyone, any adult, and help them become the best version of themselves and become a software engineer.
At Techstrong Group, we've undertaken to meet this challenge with our Engineering the Change Scholarship.
My career has completely changed to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Full $10,000 scholarship to one winner to attend the intense software development course at Boca Code.
I was just ready to be a software engineer.
So Donald is another story.
Right now, it's kind of like, I don't know.
Honestly, starting to scare me a little bit.
Roller coaster of understanding something one moment and then feeling lost the next.
If you change the capitalization of a file name, you are going to your whole project.
At the end of it, you're gonna be a really good family.
We call Stephanie like the silent ninja. As much as he's struggling, Donald really, really wants this.
My house burned down twice.
The biggest thing I'm struggling with definitely is time.
That's pretty cool that I've been able to expand my mind to be able to accept different ways of doing something.
My only option is to succeed.
Boca Code, we do it!
Highs definitely getting started. Lows would be Darius jokes.
We told all of them that this is the hardest thing they would have to go through.
All of our graduates are absolute stars.
Boca Code!
Who will graduate and become a software engineer?
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for September 19th. First up, at long last, the Ethereum merge finally occurred at the end of last week. The cryptocurrency switched from using a proof-of-work system to a proof-of-stake system. This new system will take 99% less energy and will change how the transactions occur, as well as how tokens are created. Before the software upgrade, a single transaction on Ethereum could use as much power as an average US household used in a week. Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency after Bitcoin, and analysts say that this new upgrade could give it an advantage as it seeks to grow in the crypto market. Next, South Korea's privacy watchdog has fined Google and Meta a total of $72 million over privacy violations. South Korea's Personal Information and Protection Commission cited these companies' practices of tracking consumers' online behavior without their consent, as well as using the data for targeted ads. Additionally, the commission ordered Google and Meta to provide a clear and easy process of consent. This being said, though, both companies have refuted the claims. Zooming out, this is the biggest fine ever imposed by South Korea for privacy law violations. In other news, the European Union recently announced new legislation that would make manufacturers that make devices connected to the internet meet strict cybersecurity standards. The goal of the legislation is to make the EU less vulnerable to attacks, as a ransomware attack takes place every 11 seconds, and the annual cost for cyber attacks in Europe costs somewhere between 180 and 290 billion euros. The law also aims to remove all products that are not properly protected from the EU market. The EU has stated that they witnessed an increase in the cyber attacks since the pandemic started, raising concerns that anything and everything could be attacked. With this new legislation, they hope to fix this problem. Next, NASA hosted a briefing Thursday to discuss highlights from the Perseverance mission so far. One of the big announcements was made that the rover found organic matter in some of the rocks. The organic matter was found in a rock named Wildcat Ridge, located in an ancient river delta region known as the Jezero Crater. These organic molecules are considered a potential biosignature, meaning that the substance could be evidence of past life, but these molecules could also have been produced without it. That being said, though, the Perseverance isn't equipped to find the evidence of life on Mars, as the burden of proof for finding life on other planets is incredibly high. So samples would need to be sent back to Earth to learn more. Next, Adobe has announced that it would acquire Figma for $20 billion. Adobe has been bulking up on applications that support online collaboration recently amidst a push towards more remote and hybrid work environments. Such is the case with its purchase of work management platform Workfront and the cloud-based video collaboration platform Frame.io. This purchase also takes out Adobe's biggest rival in the digital design realm, whose platform is used by firms such as Zoom, Airbnb, and Coinbase. The deal is expected to close in 2023. On Container Journal, we have an article looking at a collaboration announcement between Dell and Red Hat that will allow Red Hat's Kubernetes-based OpenShift platform to be available on all systems from Dell. The two companies also agreed to work together to build a hybrid cloud offering that will extend the management of on-prem instances of OpenShift to both public clouds and edge computing. This collaboration is expected to be available in the US by early 2023, with broader availability following shortly after. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. On Digital CXO, we have an article looking at the use of mobile apps with cloud infrastructure. With such a large prevalence of mobile apps these days, companies will need to make sure that their development processes are sound. And if it's a transactional application that requires data access from cloud data services, you need to figure out how to do that securely. This article will look at several key points that you should consider when rolling out mobile apps. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. And finally, on Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a potential cybersecurity attack on Uber and some of the community's reactions to the announcement. Uber says it's responding to a cybersecurity incident in which the hacker has appeared to take control of critical systems, including the public cloud accounts on Amazon and Google, as well as customer data, source code, and finance data. This article looks at what some of the industry leaders are saying about this. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview here. Working from home, having recently recovered from COVID. I'm happy to have as my first guest since coming back, Frank Diana, who's also a recent COVID recovery. So thank God we're both well and here able to do this. Hey Frank, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, and wishing you a speedy recovery.
Yes, as you as well. It seems like you're doing great. Frank, why don't, not everyone in our office or in our audience is going to know who you are. Why don't you give them a little background of you and your company?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Frank Diana, I am a futurist. And as you might imagine, it's a fascinating time to be one. And I am the primary futurist here at Tata Consultancy Services, which is a large services firm, one of the largest in the world, over 620,000 employees, very big brand in the space. And my time is spent mostly advising leaders around the world in terms of where the future is going and what it might mean to them. And again, fascinating conversations.
Absolutely. Look, for those of you out there who are saying, how do I get to be a futurist? That sounds like a cool job. Frank, what would you tell people?
It's funny, I get that question all the time.
Sure.
And some people follow an education path, take the courses that allow you to really focus here, whether it's anthropology or political science or history, a number of different things that you could do education-wise. And some people like myself stumble into it. I mean, if you have an ability to think at a systems level, think broadly about the world, and it is something that involves economics and politics and all kinds of things. So that breadth is important. Then you could be a futurist. It's just a function of your mental makeup. But I think people can also train for it.
Absolutely. So Frank, we could probably do a whole interview on how one goes about being a futurist and the various aspects of being a futurist and specializations and so forth. Unfortunately, we only have 15 minutes here. We have to talk about something else, and that is digital twins. And a lot of people in our audience may be familiar with the term. I bet you there's a lot of people who have heard the term, but aren't really sure about what it means. So before we dive into kind of, what is the future around digital twins and so forth, let's talk about what do we mean when we say digital twins?
So in effect, the digital twin is a digital replication or manifestation of the physical world. And that could be an asset, that could be a person. It's just that we're digitally representing that. And although we've been in this digital space for quite some time, that notion of a tipping point for digital twins is emerging because we can really capture digitally a lot more impressively than we could in the past, that physical world. And a number of different technologies are converging in ways that allow this, whether it's the sensors in the world, whether it's artificial intelligence and the models we can create. There's just a number of things converging that make this a fascinating time to think about how to leverage digital twins.
Absolutely. And, over the last, certainly since COVID, right? Talking about that earlier, we've seen the digital twinning really starting to manifest itself, right? As we move to digital, so many organizations digitally transform. You have your real world versus your digital world, if you will, analog to it. Are we reaching? You're the futurist. Tell us, talk to us. Are we reaching a tipping point here? What does it mean? If we're reaching the tipping point, what does it mean to our audience?
Well, a tipping point in the sense that the applications of digital twins and its uses is exploding. So the number of use cases, if we can imagine them, is expanding. And applying them then allows us to do a number of things. One is to experiment in ways that we couldn't before. Two is to accelerate innovation, which is critically important to anybody out there today. And three, in the context of being a futurist, it actually helps us from a foresight perspective, thinking about this future in a way that allows us to act on it in some capacity. So I think the tipping point reflects the fact that it has gotten to a place where its use has expanded and will continue to expand at an accelerating pace.
Absolutely. But what does that mean? What does that mean for the people watching this? right? How's it going to make an impact in their lives?
Yeah, so let's think through some scenarios. So one that we're actually experimenting with here at TCS is its application to the food space. So think about the food scenario in the next several years, and just waste in and of itself is a problem in that space. And so what if a digital twin of food could allow us to understand spoilage much quicker and to avoid that spoilage in ways that eliminates waste? So for example, something we call a digital banana has allowed us to actually model what causes a banana to ripen. And if you take that model and apply it in a digital twin, in this case a banana, and then apply that in the real world, you can start to understand what's happening to food in a place that allows us to act on that, right? Proactively avoid food wastage and spoilage. Just one example. Another good scenario as it applies to the human body, which is fascinating and actually was used in the COVID vaccine context, where a digital twin we use to understand the impact it might have on the body, is something that, so another example, TCS digital skin, where we've created a digital twin of our skin, which allows us to understand how drugs may affect the skin and be absorbed through the epidermal layer. There's two simple examples, and there's so many more that we can talk through. So I'll stop there, but happy to dive into several others if we want to.
That's fascinating. Let's dive into these two. Right? You can't eat digital food, right? But how, and I happen to be reading this morning, like I'm sure many of our audiences, war in Russia and Ukraine, and Ukrainian grain shipments, beginning to be felt in the world market, that the grain is making its way out, whether it's going to Europe or the third world, depends who you believe, I guess. But, how does digital twinning, let's say, help with an increased emphasis on trying to feed an ever-growing population here?
Yeah, that's a great example of technology evolving to a place where we can solve some of the greatest challenges we have. So, for example, in terms of food scarcity, which many believe is coming and getting worse on the back of climate change and other phenomena, if we could grow our foods in our city centers, vertical farming being a really good example of that, where we're growing our foods in buildings using robotics and AI to do that in a very optimal manner, then that's an example of a digital twin where we can use the science behind all this to optimize food capacity, right? So we're optimizing yield. We're doing it in ways that minimizes the use of water and fertilizers, which is obviously climate impact. And that can all be facilitated by simulating these things through these digital twins. Just one example. There's great examples of how we're doing that in the fields and the farms of the world, where precision agriculture is being used to do the same kinds of things, reduce the water consumption, reduce the use of fertilizers, optimize yields, where our machines are actually using sensors to feed these digital twins real-time information, right? So great example, and I'm glad you brought it up, in terms of a world challenge and a growing world challenge, and how these emerging technologies can be leveraged to actually solve them.
Absolutely. You mentioned the other example, and that was digital skin. And that one, I think, is probably a little easier for people to get their heads around, right? If you could reproduce a digital version of your skin and see how certain medications or treatments or ultrasound, ultraviolet, how these things interact with it, it's a much cheaper way of doing medical research, obviously. And I would imagine we could probably extend that to digital organs. And I think this is already a pretty well kind of grounded technology in terms of like folding proteins, and how we developed, again, going back to COVID, how we developed the COVID vaccines and stuff. A lot of that was done using digital technology, whether with DNA manipulation in a digital realm before it, went to the real world.
Yeah, great examples. We already have a digital heart, a digital twin of the heart. And to the point, as we do these things, we start to assess how things impact the heart. And we do that in a way that doesn't involve humans in clinical trials, doesn't involve animals through animal testing, which is another good positive impact in the use of these technologies. And what if we could do a digital brain, and eventually we'll get there as well, and understand the implications of drugs to the brain and impact of any vaccine as it emerges, as these extreme events that we believe will continue to happen force us to quickly understand the impact of those events. And I think digital twin and the AI technologies that are evolving will do that for us.
Agreed. Agreed. So those are two, I think, concrete examples. There's other examples, though, Frank, that kind of maybe a little bit further out there, off-world economy stuff and things like that. There, where we take, I think people understand now what we're talking about, but here are some far-reaching implications. Why don't you kind of clue us in on that, if you don't mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned off-planet economies, and that really, in a nutshell, is just about doing more and more in space, whether it's growing our foods in space, back to that scarcity issue, and how you might do that. So think about a digital twin that tries to simulate the growth of food in space. Or if we mine asteroids to avoid the resource scarcity that many believe is coming, how could you model a digital twin of an asteroid that helps us understand that? And if we do have any aspirations to live on Mars somewhere down the road, a digital twin of the Mars environment would be another good example how we might explore that. And those are further off into the future. But if we were a little bit closer, the metaverse is obviously a hot topic, and it in effect is a bunch of digital twins that start to simulate reality. And so a digital twin of a city, a digital twin of the road infrastructure of any given city. And what if that digital twin saw a pothole emerging before anybody else saw it, and then proactively gets people to address that pothole? So an example a little further out, but not that far out where we can't see and envision the benefits of those kinds of things. And then I believe that some of the challenges that these future scenarios pose, let's think in the context of EVs and the concern that lithium and cobalt and nickel it's just not going to be enough of that. Material sciences is one answer to those problems, where we find new materials that actually solve these problems. And I believe digital twins will accelerate the path of material sciences in ways that we apply those materials and solve other challenges as we do so, right? So there's just a number of these scenarios emerging that are fascinating to think about, and not really science fiction. I mean, I believe a lot of people still have the science fiction feel to this, but it's happening.
We've been looking about. So we put on a lot of events, right? We used to put on in-person events. Obviously, during COVID, we shifted to virtual events. The fact is, people are getting bored with virtual events, right? They're tired of just logging in and watching some talking head in the slideshow. And we've been looking here at Techstrong at digital metaverse kind of technologies where we can kind of better duplicate that in-person experience in a digital environment like that. The problem we run into, Frank, is, without actually going out and getting everyone an Oculus or something like that, the state of the technology today is such is that we can't bring them into that metaverse. We can't bring them into that digital environment without some today expensive kind of technology. What do you see? I mean, do we get to the point where Oculus is, ante up to experience a lot of this digital stuff, or is there another technology maybe that just enables this to go broad, really mainstream?
Yeah, at this stage, I think we're creating too tight a linkage between the virtual reality domain and the metaverse, because if you think about the gaming ecosystem that's been in place for quite some time now, it is really the underpinning of the metaverse at the end of the day. So you could create a gaming kind of environment or a metaverse, if you will, to do the things you talked about, more realism to the kinds of meetings and interviews that we're doing right now. In a gaming kind of context, 3D oriented, you could scan yourself, for example, and plop yourself right into that metaverse environment. assets and artifacts can be scanned, sculptures. Just think about the possibilities as we go forward. But it doesn't necessarily have to rely on an Oculus or virtual reality component to it. I think that evolves much more rapidly on the back of the pandemic than it might have otherwise. But it's not the critical piece of the story if indeed we want to exploit the metaverse. And there's so much speculation out there. It's such a big buzzword these days that honestly, who knows where this stuff will actually eventually go, right? But I do think you could accomplish what you're talking to in more of a gaming context than a virtual reality context.
Agreed. Anyway, hey, we're about out of time, but Frank, this is fascinating stuff. What a great job to have, right? For all the people out there wondering, I want that job. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe you could come on one of our virtual events where we're talking about the future and that we'll dive deeper into this. Yeah. But I want to thank you.
Thank you.
For people who maybe want to follow you or find out more about what Tanta's doing, especially around digital twinning and so forth, is there any place you'd recommend?
The TCS.com website is a great place to learn more about that. And if people are interested in the future and the types of things I talk about, my blog is frankdiana.net. So a couple of the resources there for anybody that's interested.
Fantastic. Hey, Frank, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I'm really happy to be joined by Josh Steller. Again, Josh has been a guest on our show before. And for those who don't know, he's with Sneak. Hey, Josh, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Alan, thanks for having me back. Great.
Always nice to have you here. Josh, I'm sure not everyone watching is familiar with Josh, and some of them may not even be familiar with Sneak. So why don't we start off right there and give people a little bit of your background, a little bit of the company background.
Sure thing. So, I'm Josh Stella. I've been a software developer, architect, and entrepreneur for quite some time. I co-founded a company called Fugue, focused on cloud security. Just about a decade ago now. Prior to that, worked at AWS as a principal solutions architect in the national security world, and pretty much have lived all things cloud security for about the last decade. Fugue was acquired by Sneak in February, and we are busily building out and going to launch soon a product called Sneak Cloud. Of course, Sneak is a company, we make security software that's developer oriented. So things that your engineers and developers can use natively in their workflows, starting with application and open source code, and now all the way out into cloud, hence the Fugue acquisition. So I went from being the CEO at Fugue to being chief architect here at Sneak.
Excellent. And Sneak, for those of you watching out there and not familiar, Sneak was one of, I think, the very first companies that did a great job of embracing DevSecOps for what it is, right? There were a lot of security companies that were kind of pussyfooting around the edge of DevSecOps and the whole shift left movement, where Sneak came out and said, hey, we're doing security for developers here, right? We're helping developers develop secure code by designing security tools for them. And I think that was, at the time they did it, it was not revolutionary. I think it was the evolution of the whole DevSecOps movement. But it certainly was a watermark where, hey, we're acknowledging, we're not lying about it. We're not playing that old security versus developer dynamic. This is what we're doing. Interestingly, Josh, and with your background in Fugue and everything else, DevSecOps, it was not immediately sort of joined at the hip with cloud and cloud security. As much as you think it's a no-brainer, right? It obviously, but it wasn't. It really wasn't.
It's
thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. It's taken some time. Yeah, you're right. In joining Sneak, so Guy Padjarny, the founder of Sneak, reached out to me a little over a year ago now, almost a year and a half, and we started talking about working together, maybe a partnership, and that turned into the acquisition talk, and then the acquisition. The reason for that is we both have had a very similar view of the world, which is both companies have the fundamental problems in security now are software engineering problems at the end of the day. They're things that have to be solved by different kinds of developers. Security teams need to be highly conscious of them and tracking them and monitoring them and so on. But until you're getting the developers to make the right choices at the beginning, you're going to keep digging the hole, so to speak. And yeah, it's taken a while for that to really enter into the cloud space. I think in part because very often the populations of developers writing applications and doing things like platform engineering with Terraform, they might be different people in the organization. There's some overlap, but there's also some difference between those groups. And so the DevSecOps world seemed to really start getting going even more on the application side than on the cloud side. But now what we see with all of our customers, we have thousands of customers, they want millions of users. They want to see the system as a whole. So the application as a whole. And so that's everything from the application code through to the infrastructure as code, through to the running cloud environment. That's all one thing, right? And that's what we're working on.
Got it. Excellent. So let's jump in though, because we'll go off on a rabbit hole here and lose the whole thing, Josh. You guys recently did a survey that we're supposed to be talking about around cloud and cloud security. Why don't we jump into that?
Yeah, great. Great. So yeah, every year for I think this is our fourth one, we have done a state of cloud security survey and did them for 3 years at Fugue and now for the first time here at Sneak. And in these, they're not really oriented toward our products. We're just trying to understand where people are, the state of how security is being done, where the challenges are, et cetera, out there in the cloud world. And so I think this year we always have at least 300 practitioners who are operating at scale in the cloud. So we're getting real use cases. Sorry, I've got a bit of a sniffle here, but we're getting real use cases. Huh?
I said, it's okay. We all do.
Yeah. And this year was, as it always is, enlightening. And I think that to me, the top headline is people are becoming aware that this is a more prevalent problem than they had thought. And it's getting more complex, more challenging, not less complex and less challenging. And there's a lot of ways that they came out, that really came out in the survey. 66% of organizations surveyed experienced a serious cloud security incident in the last year. 2/3, right? And that is up from where we saw it a year ago. So even though I think sometimes in the news there's maybe less reporting on the big high-profile breaches, although obviously I guess it was earlier this year the Twitch breach was a pretty big one, but it's happening every day in invisible ways.
Absolutely. So you gave us the big headline. Josh, in every one of these surveys that we see a lot of them come across our desk here, obviously, there's always some things that kind of are maybe counterintuitive or like, wow, I wouldn't have guessed that, or I wouldn't have thought that. What do you think of the big counterintuitive or surprises, if any, in this one?
So to me, well, I guess having spent a decade or more focused purely on this, it wasn't surprising to me, but I was glad to, I think it is counterintuitive to most folks. And that is that the most vulnerable systems in the cloud are the ones that are lifted and shifted from the data center. The ones that are natively built in cloud technologies don't suffer as many breaches as those that are brought over. And I think that the reason this surprises folks and doesn't surprise me is they think they can use their traditional security tools with the lift and shift workloads. Whereas with the cloud native workloads, they know that the TCP/IP network is not the network you care most about. It's the identity network, things like that. Well, in a traditional lift and shift, you're probably emulating the same kind of layer 3 and up through layer 7 network security and boundaries and all that stuff. And the attack surface in the cloud is just very different. So I think that was an interesting finding to me.
Yes, it's an interesting finding, but Josh, like you, I've been in security years and years, and to me, it just proves out the point. Our friend Rich Mogul, I don't know if you know Rich. Rich used to use a term years ago called cloud washing, where we were just shifting and lifting stuff into the cloud, and then we cloud wash it and say, okay, now it's in the cloud and you get all the benefits of being in the cloud, including security. And the fact of the matter is, most of those applications that were cloud washed were not designed to take advantage, not only not to take advantage of the cloud security kind of architecture or cloud native, as we call a lot of it now, as it's come to evolve. But it brought with it a lot of the vulnerabilities and defects in design that were in that TCP architecture that were inherent in this all along. And now just put them up there in the cloud, where it might be even a little easier for people to get to. So, it doesn't surprise me at all, right? What does surprise me, though, is, look, if you design it for the cloud, build it in the cloud, and really leverage a cloud-native infrastructure, I think you get a tremendous amount of benefits around security with that.
Oh, you do. I remember when we went through our first SOC 2 audit at Fugue, and we were built largely on functions as a service, Lambdas, and we weren't managing our in-database servers. We were using RDS and DynamoDB and things like this. And we got to the part of the SOC 2 questionnaire about our operating system patching. And we said, well, we don't do any because we don't have it. We don't manage any operating systems in our entire system. And there was this kind of pause, like, what? Well, by offloading a lot of that onto the cloud service providers who do this for a living and are extremely good at it, you are reducing the amount of attack surface you are responsible for. Now, so I believe that the cloud is by far the most potentially secure computing platform that we've ever made as a species, but you have to understand the attack surfaces in the cloud. They're radically different than the ones in the data center, and that shows up in all the breaches. So, for example, I mentioned the Twitch breach, and that one's interesting in that even an Amazon company got breached. Right? These are deep experts in cloud security. And so even they can fall victim to these things, and it all comes back to the design of the system. In the case of the Twitch breach, it was finding an individual server that was probably a forgotten about artifact that was sitting out there, get inside, and then jump over to source code repositories and using API keys on the control plane. And that's what we see over and again. So I was pleased in the survey as well, and this has been going on for a couple of years now, where the respondents are saying, yeah, the IAM, the API keys, the key rotation, these are critical to cloud security. Yes, they are. That is how the bad guys do it.
Yep. You know what, Scott, while we're almost out of time, but I wanted to kind of, if you don't mind me, kind of, prompting you on this. Well, by the time most people see this, the sneak event in New York City will have already been taking place. But you guys are announcing some new cloud functionality there.
Yeah.
Without getting in trouble, can you talk about it?
Oh, yeah. Happy to talk about it. So, it was important both to Sneak and to Fugue that when they acquired us, that we not kind of put the Sneak logo on a product that was not fully integrated. We wanted an integrated platform from open source libraries, all the traditional Sneak products, deep code, AI, introspection, infrastructure as code, containers, all the Sneak products, and adding the Fugue technologies into a cloud product that is completely integrated with that platform. And so we took from February until now, we are in closed beta on Sneak Cloud, and we will be launching it into general availability in Q4. And what we're building is, I think, completely unique in that because we understand every aspect of the application, not the source code of the application. We don't just understand like the infrastructure it's running on or the cloud configuration. We know the pieces of the application code, where they have dependencies that might have vulnerabilities, where practices in the application code might expose vulnerabilities. And we connect that all the way out to where those things are running in the infrastructure. And so we can see weaknesses that are the result of combining those things. And going back to the Twitch breach, why does a server sitting out there with a connection to the internet have any API keys, directly or indirectly, that can get to Git repos? That is not, but unless you're seeing the application and the infrastructure, you're not going to be able to connect those dots. So that's what we're working on, is that full system view.
Fantastic. Josh, for people who want to get more information about the survey, as well as maybe find out more about this Sneak Cloud product, just go to sneak.com and go from there, or is there a special area?
Sneak.io.
Excuse me, right
there. And no, we're you'll see the survey right on the site. That's releasing, I think, tomorrow. And tomorrow.
Tomorrow, from when we recorded this
conversation,
right? From people will probably see this early next week, so it's out already.
It's out already. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The magic of the metaverse. All right, hey Josh, good luck. Good luck up at what's the name of the event in New York City? Sneak World?
Sneak Week. It's a relatively small event, but we see a lot of our best customers there, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Good. Glad to hear it. Josh, great seeing you. Keep up the great work. Come back and keep us posted, okay?
Absolutely. Great to talk, Alan.
All right. Josh Steller of Sneak here on Techstrong TV. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live in Austin, continuing our coverage of Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. And forgive me if we're a little security heavy this week, but it's actually, it's good for my soul to see security taking center stage here front and center. Our next guest is Caleb Brown. Caleb joins us from Sydney.
Yes, I come from Sydney on behalf of Google and the open source security team.
Absolutely. Caleb, first of all, welcome and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Second of all, we were talking off camera. I know several friends in the Google security world, but not in the open source security team. So tell me, what's the charter for the Google open source security team?
That's a great question, and one I should be able to answer off the top of my head. I've only been with the team like 6 to 9 months, so I'm still like, I feel green. But the charter is to improve the security of open source and to make it safe and secure for people to consume. And so we work very closely with the OpenSSF, and a lot of our work is through them and through the projects that they run.
Well, Google is one of the biggest corporate benefactors of OpenSSF, but they're not alone.
No,
IBM, Microsoft, to name some of the big ones. And there's a lot more. I think it's 30 or 50.
Oh, it's growing really rapidly.
And growing every day, I was going to say that. And I mean, look, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why Google is invested in this. Google, probably one of the biggest open source consumers as well as open source creators in the world. So if we're going to tackle open source security head on, you'd want Google involved in it for obvious reasons.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, look, 6 to 9 months is a lifetime in tech, right? This is internet time. You're like 21 years in on this. But, you know, we were talking a little off camera. Your background is more in DevOps and.
So I've worked on a variety of projects, but my interest in terms of places that I've enjoyed kind of having an impact and being able to work has been in thinking through how can we make the process of development not just easier for developers, but easier to repeatable and safe, and to be able to be confident that we're going to be able to ship products that are going to work for our customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, and again, we were talking off camera, this whole notion of calling something software supply chain security, you know, if you're from a DevOps background, you know how much it borrows from Lean and Lean IT and and how much Lean IT borrows from Lean manufacturing. So that whole notion of supply chain and supply chain security, to me, is lifted out of the Lean lexicon. And so, you know, so it's a very DevOps-centric view of how we build software and how we should secure it.
For sure, yeah.
That being said, it's been a tough couple of years, right?
Yeah.
We've had some very, very high-profile incidents, and, you know, not to say it didn't happen before and it won't happen again, but certainly the last 2 years have been tough. You know, and it's shined a real spotlight on this.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of driving the growth of the OpenSSF
no
and
doubt.
the space is the prior incidents.
Yeah.
The focus from the White House, those sorts of things. Yeah.
You know what? I've been in security 20-something, almost 25 years. I will tell you, there's nothing better for security than a good old breach or incident, right? Because that gets people religion, right?
Yes, that's right.
But it's amazing. Memories are short-lived, and they go back to their old non-secure ways. But is what it is. Anyway, let's talk about, you know, what is Google
and I'm asking you now on behalf of, in your position here, what are you guys seeing from the OpenSSF that gives you, makes you optimistic, that says, hey, we're doing something on the right track here?
I am a few things that I'm kind of been really impressed to see, particularly yesterday in the OpenSSF Day, and also in my involvement through the OpenSSF, is the growing adoption of things like SigStore for artifact signing and attestation, and OSV being more broadly adopted. So those sorts of initiatives give me some hope that
OSV, I don't know if our audience is familiar.
OSV is I'm going to get the name wrong. It's basically
it's going to be an open source.
It could be, but it's kind of a CVE. I can't remember, and I'm like, my team in Sydney is the one working on it.
We're not going to
blank on it. Anyway, it's kind of a contributor, an open approach to things like CVE.
Okay.
So
I get it.
CVE is kind of centralized and controlled.
NIST.
And if someone looks at the CVE and goes, that's wrong, or we need to update that, it's very hard.
Actually, look, I don't mean to give you a tripped up question. That's not
That's
ever
all
what
right.
I do. We've had guests explain it to us. And it really, from what I know about it, and if I'm wrong, you could blame me, don't blame Caleb. From what I know about it is CVE is rather rigid in that they tell you if something is a critical or medium or light kind of vulnerability. With OSV, there are other factors that get put into the mix that allow an organization, each organization, for their world to rate a given vulnerability or a given condition as, this is red, red, yellow, or whatever you want to scale it.
The other big problem it's trying to solve is it's really hard to kind of take that and then process it in a way where you can do it at scale. So right. OSV is like a specific schema around how this vulnerability information is defined so that you can build tooling around it.
Yes.
And you can automate the process of linking up your internal dependencies to the report. So
and
super valuable.
Putting the cherry on it is it gives organizations a chance to customize this for their own environments and their own risk factors and everything else, which is important, right? That was always one of the things with CVE. Just because you're categorizing it as critical, look, for us, it's not, because for whatever reason, right? We've got it walled off. It's whatever. I think that is important. I'd like to ask, so have you had much involvement with some of the other OSSF partners?
I'll get to that. Oh, you mean the other companies?
Yeah.
I've been some small collaboration, with IBM on one of the projects that I'm involved in, which has been really interesting, and a little bit with Sonotype as well. I've bumped into them on another project that I work on as well. I haven't had a lot of opportunities to be engaged, and it's very early days, but it's one of the things I'm actually also, it's really exciting about this space is that there's this place where people are communicating from different companies to try and come up with things together, rather than somebody saying, here's a thing we built, please use it. And then it never gets
it's also, look, open source security and software supply chain security is so important right now that it's too important to let it become balkanized, right? To let it to become, every company has their own flavor of this, because you're never going to really address the totality of it if it's broken into 20 different flavors, languages, and,
that's right,
and variations. This is something that's screamed out for a industry-wide response, and it just so happened that OpenSSF was I mean, sometimes things happen for a reason, right? I was talking to the person before you, a supply chain security company based in Tel Aviv. They were founded, I think, in December of 2019. The next month, SolarWinds happens.
Was that Sneak, by the way?
No. They're older than that.
Okay,
This
they're
one
older.
was
Okay.
legit, I think was the name of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Sneak's a little older.
Yeah.
But anyway, talk about better to be lucky than smart sometimes. If you're going to start a software supply chain company a month or two before the SolarWinds incident isn't a bad time to do it.
No, that's very fortunate.
Yeah, but
unfortunate for people who suffered from that.
Right,
but,
and I'm not minimizing any of the suffering or aggravation it's caused, but certainly. It seems to me as just someone sitting here, I'm not as involved as you are, that, excuse me, having an organization like this to tackle the problem that we're seeing right now, if this was 5 years ago, what would we be doing?
That's right.
We'd be in a heap of world of trouble.
So I like even the collaboration amongst the package repositories has been amazing to see, where you have people from Maven and Ruby Gems and Pipey and NPM, all these different parts of the world, like an open source, being together in a room and talking about what's going on and how can they improve their security. That's a great thing to see, and I think it's going to have a massive
absolutely. I think it will. And when 90% of the software we're using has open source in it, it's the time has come for this, right? This was past time even. So I'm really happy to be involved in that. You mentioned several projects you're involved in. Why don't you tell us a little?
Sure thing. So I'm involved in two they're still growing and establishing projects. The first is about scoring and discovering critical projects. So one of OpenSSF's kind of biggest thing is to spend money and make the most critical projects secure or more secure. And I guess a big question in that is, what are the critical projects? So there is a working group that is involved in trying to answer that question. And there are various approaches. So the OpenSSF spent money, collaborated with Harvard to produce the Harvard Census Report, which is academic researchers looking at data from some organizations about how their dependencies fit together and how what are the critical dependencies based on that. And then they're in the working group as well, they're talking about how can we engage experts in communities to be able to get their thoughts on what is or isn't critical. The project I'm specifically involved in is about doing that programmatically and automatically by basically querying sources of data on the internet, collecting a bunch of signals about all the projects that are out there, and then trying to computer score basically that we can use to discover what is critical and what's not critical.
That's great stuff.
So yeah, the big part of this is about automating it and making it so we can keep repeating it. It's hard to query experts over and over again. It's hard to conduct research in a way that's regular and repeatable. But computers are really good at doing automatic things. So that's what we're trying to do.
If something's going to work, that should work, right?
Yeah. That's at the stage where I'm trying to kind of get it up and get it automated. But we're also interested in how organizations can use this project for understanding their own dependencies and what things that they use that are critical as well, so that they can see where their I guess gaps and exposure is to, and hopefully invest back into open source in those areas where they can and where they need to. So
love it.
That's that project. Yeah, and I also work on another one. It's got a really boring name. It's just called Package Analysis.
Okay.
And what it does is, the way I've been explaining it, because it's kind of tricky, is it's basically like a virus scanning for open source packages on package repositories.
When you say it's looking for virus, or
it's not actually looking for viruses. What it's trying to do is collect behavioral data, and the way it works is it watches for an update on the package repository. So someone posts a new package to NPM. it'll detect that and download it, and then it currently only does dynamic analysis, but it'll run dynamic analysis on the NPM package in a sandbox, and it sees what are the DNS requests is it making, what are the sockets it's opening, and what are the files it's touching, is it executing commands, and from that, it then stores that information. And then the idea is that researchers could use that as a way to find malicious packages, which is what I've basically been doing with it for the moment. But you can also then use that over time to start to get a picture of how a package might change in terms of its behavior. So if somebody compromises an account for a repository maintainer or a package maintainer, we can see that this thing was just doing normal stuff and now suddenly it's hitting some random domain on the internet. Maybe that's a problem.
Could be.
Yeah. And so hopefully, like in the next steps, it's about kind of integrating in a way where developers can better use that data that we're generating so that we can be meaningful, like that data is meaningful and useful to somebody other than people who are using the database as a security researching tool. So, so that's where we're heading with that. And it's kind of both interesting to see what it can detect. It's very early stages, so we haven't got a whole lot of kind of smarts built into it. But even still, we're detecting things, which, is great, but it's also kind of like a sign of how far we've got to go in improving things. So,
well, it's a fine beginning, as they say in Las Vegas.
That's right. And the other thing is, it's really important. I feel it's important to be doing this as well because supply chain integrity is going to solve a lot of problems where you can be confident that that binary, that package you've got, is is from somebody. But if that person is untrustworthy and builds something insecure or malicious and then delivers it to you, they can have the perfect software supply chain integrity. All the signing and signatures can be correct. The attestation might be correct. But if that thing is itself malicious, then that's a place for package analysis to sit there and be able to detect where that's still happening. So,
love it. Sounds great, man. Hey, Caleb, we're over time. I got to pull it, but it's all. First of all, thank you for coming all the way here from Sydney. Thank you for your involvement in the Open SSF and for the projects you're on, and wish you nothing but success with this, man.
Thanks, Alan.
We're all pulling for you.
Yeah, no worries.
And your success is all of our success, so thank you very much. Caleb Brown, Google, open source security, and member of the Open SSF. Here at, we're on Techstrong TV. We're live in Austin for the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everyone, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some more upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first up tomorrow, Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, Adaptive Shield joins us on Security Boulevard for SaaS security trends, challenges, and solutions for 2022. We will discuss insights from the 2022 SaaS Security Survey Report, review classic challenges as well as the next trends, and look at what solutions are available now. Following on DevOps.com, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, the word of the hour is reliability. Gremlin is taking us through Beyond Chaos Engineering, using reliability scores to drive real results. So improving reliability starts with measuring it. This program aims to help you build reliability into your culture and your development process. And finally, if your security risks are battling your security budget, you will not want to miss Doing More with Less. How to improve AppSec programs when budgets decrease. Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, Psycode joins us on Security Boulevard to discuss ways to accelerate software delivery and improve security outcomes, all while reducing costs. So that is all that I have for you today, but we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning, so stay tuned.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real, who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Say with great power comes great responsibility.
We got to take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really can write well.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden buzzer.
So,
she's in.
The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah, that's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too, and I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell, really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah, being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our 3 finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you on the next show.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
I have the great pleasure of being joined by Michael Neal. Michael is Chief Scientist with CloudBees. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. All the way from Australia to Colorado, Sydney. Good to be chatting today.
Yep. Right from the Antipodes, or almost directly. If you look down, you'd see me. Not quite, but
Just take a look. Well, hey, so I'd love to, I always have folks introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about CloudBees. I'd love to hear about Chief Scientist and what that role is.
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of CloudBees going back, a lot of years now, 10 or 12 years. And we started as a sort of a developer-centric platform as a service, and then pivoted more towards CI/CD pipelines. And then as DevOps took off as its own discipline, we sort of pivoted into that direction and being sort of an enterprise at-scale DevOps platform. As a chief scientist, I'm kind of scouting out new technologies that we may want to include, or maybe even new products that we may want to build in the platform in future. And that also means we can make use of some of the new technologies that are out there, SaaS services, APIs, things like AI that might make things a little bit nervous to sneak in a product today, but in a few years' time might be a lot more mainstream. So that's kind of my day-to-day.
Excellent. That's good to hear from someone who has the focus a little farther downfield, right, to see where we might go, what we can leverage and put into the product for customers. It's like a fun job too.
It is. It's a lot of fun, but you have to be prepared to sort of throw things away, which sometimes people get attached to something, or something comes out of the blue and becomes really popular, and you think, why is that? Why didn't I see that coming? It can be frustrating, but it's also fun as well.
You have to be careful not to fall in love with the latest thing, because it's not always the right thing or ready.
Yeah,
right?
Does it actually work? Is it actually useful? Things like that, or especially AI is notorious for that. It looks really promising. When the rubber meets the road, it might be a bit of a letdown for people.
We hear it. I think we hear and probably experience a lot of that. Well, let's chat about DevOps Worlds coming up on the 27th through the 29th of September. I'm real curious in your perspective. I'm sure you talk with a lot of customers. You have longevity, of course, as a co-founder with CloudBees. You've been in DevOps since there's been DevOps, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, that's right.
And what sort of people are going to come to DevOps World, or hopefully after hearing this, they'll sign up and come. And they're going to be at a place where they're living it, right? Either they're starting their journey, they're slogging it out, they're trying to scale it, they're kind of getting it really working for them. Where's your sense of where most people are in that journey?
Yeah, I've been to quite a few DevOps Worlds throughout the years, and I'd sort of group them into two people. There's some people that sort of turn up almost with a shopping list. And I've done this as well at conferences. I want to talk to this person. I've got this problem to solve. Usually they're fairly early on in their journey, or they've started using some CI/CD and they're having trouble scaling with this, or with their teams with that, or they don't know what the best deployment approach is and they want to learn more, or they want to tackle a specific problem. Like they've got something very in mind and they'll know what sessions to go to. That's pretty common, especially from the larger companies. And then I've often been surprised with people from like really sort of companies I wouldn't expect, like a medical equipment manufacturer that came along, and they didn't have a specific agenda, but they're like, we want to learn about DevOps because it sounds really good, and we want to be able to update the firmware on our medical equipment. You know, maybe it's blood pressure monitors or something, in the way Apple do on apps on your iPhone. So we'll go to conferences, we'll learn about that. And yes, there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of compliance, but we think we can solve that with the right tools and the right people. So you get these people that are kind of exploratory. I met someone from a space company, a rocket company. They were doing something to do with launching satellites. And they were really interested in how the ideas of DevOps could apply to, I don't know if they'd call it avionics, I don't know what it's called. But yeah, they were very exploratory. They were sort of open-minded. I expect they go to a lot of conferences. But it was really interesting to sort of see the two ends of the spectrum. One is like, what is this? Does it apply to my field? And the other one is, you know, I'm partway through my journey or just starting, and here's the roadblocks I've got right in front of me. Who do I talk to? You know, what do I buy? Sort of things. And I know the sponsors of the conference love the people who say we want to buy stuff. So there's tons of every vendor across the DevOps spectrum will be able to sell you some solution there, and which is good as well. You're not sort of on your own.
Seems like too. There's also maybe a third group is I don't know where to get started. I just like it's.
Oh yeah.
There's a wide array of things, and people say start at CI/CD.
Oh
so
yeah.
I'm here to figure out what that is. That's what I'm.
Oh yeah. Yes, I've definitely come across that. And often they're told to go, or you know, they could be at all different levels of an organization. They said we're going to be kicking off a digital transformation or a DevOps initiative. Here's a conference, or here's a set of conferences you can go to. I've even, had meetings pre-conference with companies that they know they need to speed up what they do or cope with changes quicker. So they go, how do we DevOps? So that, and that's tricky for me because it's like you said, when you've kind of been an insider for maybe too long, you kind of don't really know where to start. I don't know where I'd start today. Like if you were starting out, there's so much to choose from. I could easily find myself getting paralyzed. So I hope those people turn along and they latch onto something and go, we'll just, because often it doesn't matter too much where you start, as long as you start working down that CI/CD or continuous something or DevOps practice path, then you'll naturally get better if you really want to do it. But yeah, there's definitely that. I don't often run into them in the conference, but maybe in the hallway track and things like that. There'll be people that are, I don't know where to start. That's definitely a third cohort.
One thing that seems to work pretty well is if you're looking for that place to start, or you're kind of working on the next problem, is don't try to boil the ocean, change the whole organization at once.
Exactly.
Right? It's kind of taking how your organization operates. What do you do well? What's the flow already happening? And then can you take some part of DevOps and say, now let's change that and do that this way, but it can fit into how we're doing, as opposed to you have to forget everything you know and start thinking about it this way.
That's right.
Let's not make the jump to microservices on day one, for mainframe applications or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just, personally, I would go, well, what things are done manually today that you could automate away? What approvals could you get rid of and things like that? And that would probably go a lot of the way there. Like if you're doing much manually, then getting rid of that's a huge step. And that would probably be a great starting point. Not get too caught up on what Netflix is doing or what Google's doing or something else. Just, what can I automate that just makes things a bit better? I did hear, it was after a conference, I saw a write-up. I think it was on one of the Jenkins blogs, about a bank that went from they kind of measured their progress. They took their existing pipeline, codified it into CI/CD, but had about a dozen manual checkpoints where someone would approve it. And then over time, they whittled that down to 2, and they kind of measured their progress of how many times do we have to stop and wait for a person to press a button to approve. And that's a very good way to quantify your progress, if you like. I think a lot of companies have probably moved on from that today, but then I expect a lot haven't.
Oftentimes, I have to force myself to remember not everybody's been doing this 2 or 3 or 5 years, right? Some folks are starting out.
Well, yeah, you see those. Well, it was a few years ago now, but you'd see those surveys that are like, how many companies are doing things like source control, and I would always gasp and cover my mouth, and it's like, like, what else is going on? And I would like to think, I'm probably too scared to look, but I'd like to think that we've moved on beyond that stage. But if we haven't, maybe we shouldn't judge its people. But I think things have moved along. The tools are a lot more user friendly now, so it is a lot more approachable. It's a lot less cutting edge to do at least the basics. At least automating a build.
The starting point, and I mean, just to focus on that, but the starting point is a much better place to start today than it was 5 or 8 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not doing the same level of tool integration and building and stitching it all together just to make it work, right?
Yeah, 8 to 10 years ago, it was still an open question what SCM you were using. It's kind of become a bit of a Git monoculture, outside of the Googles and Facebooks of the world and Twitter. Which has made things easier because, there's familiar hooks, there's webhooks, there's events, there's, branching models, there's pull requests, and all of this familiar lingua franca has really helped. But you go back 10 years ago, it could have been Subversion, it could have been Mercurial, ClearCase was still around. And all of those things had very different integrations and plugins or extensions and capabilities, and you might see some practice of someone doing something with Mercurial and you couldn't translate that to Visual Source Safe or something that you were using or Visual Team Studio from Microsoft. But now things have converged on, almost a standard, which is Git. I think that's made the starting point of automation vastly easier.
Yeah, I totally agree. By the way, Jenkins was my starting point about 2013 or 14.
Right.
Project that and moving to Git was because the first two.
Right. Yeah. And Jenkins actually predates Git, if you can believe it. Like Git was like an optional integration for the longest time, which still blows my mind because to me, Git's been around forever. But if I go way back to the start of my career, I got I think I converted a company over to CVS, the next company over to Subversion, and then finally to Git and then GitHub. And, that's a familiar sort of journey. And each time it was a lot of work. But now I don't even. I don't even. Yeah, that's right. That was in there. But it's like now I don't even think about it. It's just you kind of take it for granted, which I think's maybe that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Those problems have been solved and
they've been solved. Yes, that's right. We don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to go to a new company or a new project and then decide, all of these things. The railway's been laid down for you. So I think that's really good.
Well, so as you step back and you're looking forward and kind of where things are going, as you think about this conference coming up this year, the 2022 edition, what do you think will be sort of the emerging theme or trend, or what are you anticipating to see, and what do you hope to see if you were attending this year?
Yeah, I guess putting the vendor hat on, I'd hope to see that a wide variety of companies that are a fair way along using DevOps in their digital transformation, that it's not an open question. Surely by now we'd be seeing that. If not, how can we help these people to get along? And the other trend I'm curious to see is in the larger enterprises that are often heavily represented in this conference, there's always been a hesitancy to use either public cloud or software as a service and that. And I'm sensing a shift amongst that, where people are realizing, look, we might not be the best at running all of this software. What can we, what's undifferentiated heavy lifting that we can move to the public cloud or other vendors? So I'm suspecting that we'll see a great deal more of that. Like if you look at sort of the Hacker News sort of world of DevOps, then everyone's already there. Everyone's using SaaS. Why would you? And, if I was starting a company now, of course you do that. You would, you don't run your own email servers. Everything's consumed as a service. But for the larger, long-lived enterprises, there's constraints or perceived constraints and compliance needs that have sort of held them back. So I'm expecting that to sort of change. That would be, I would expect to see that. I would be very curious if people are talking about my sort of hobby horse, which is the sort of code generation AI tools that are writing code for people, automating away the boring stuff. If I hear people talking about that, that would be fascinating. I still think that's, still a couple of years in the future, but it's already working pretty well. So I expect to see that maybe not at this conference, but people start to talk about it. And the reason is there's a lot of the right, yeah, a lot of the config work in DevOps, whether it's a Terraform file or a pipeline, it's all very good to edit and do that stuff, but really, there's time you spend doing that. There's time you spend not building your apps. So if you've got high level AI tools that can kind of look at your code and do that for you, I think that's great. So, but that's putting on, sort of the scientist hat of, is that where people are going to go, or are they not going to do that? And they like hanging on to their servers and pipelines and stuff. We'll see.
I'm curious your opinion about this. Often if you haven't been in a big enterprise, you don't really realize how much investment they make in doing it themselves. Oftentimes, because before you couldn't get something that would scale to that size. You're running your own farm of Exchange servers just to run email, and suddenly, okay, well, we can go to 365. Sometimes those are driven by cost, right? We can do that much more efficiently. My sense is around DevOps and moving to SaaS platforms is we have better things for you to do than stitch together tools and maintain this complex fabric of what we have to have today. But I'd rather have you working on the next thing, the next value outcome, not just value to get software out the door, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. There's the better companies are definitely doing that. They used to see IT and software as a cost center, but because of competitive pressures now, they go, oh, actually, this is now a core part of our business. And if it's a core part of our business, we'll start paying attention to it. And then we look at it and we see people are spending all this time, maintaining servers or scripts for this and that, when there's platforms out there that do that for you. Like, wouldn't it make sense to make use of them? And then you can spend the time actually doing the differentiating features that set you apart. And in the past, a lot of companies would think, yes, we need to do this software, but we would rather use commercial off the shelf if it existed. It doesn't, so we'll hack some code together. I think those days are gone, where now people see it as potentially a strategic advantage in the market, either because it makes their company valued more, as a stock, as perception, or it allows them to compete with these sort of digital native incumbents that are coming in, especially in banking and things like that. And I think through the pandemic, we even saw that happen a bit with the sort of pharmaceutical companies teaming up with these super fast software driven I don't want to call them startups, but they kind of are like a Moderna or something like that, or BioNTech. They're very high tech, very digital. So I think even these companies that some of them are 100 years old, 120 years old, 100. Even those are feeling pressure from digital natives. So I think the clever ones tend to view software as an asset, a differentiator, and they're the ones that are probably pushing harder for this versus staying with the status quo.
Software has moved to be part of the strategy, not just part of the back office operations, right? It's kind of
that's right. Yeah, when we grew up, it was very much the back office, and being in IT was, throughout my career, I always thought, well, I want to work at a company where IT is the business, not the business is something else. And I've worked at banks, I worked at insurance companies, I've worked with the military and stuff like that. And there's always the business or the field or something like that. When you're in a software company, you are the business, and increasingly, a lot of these companies are seeing it that way as well, which is good, and it's good for all of the people attending the DevOps conference. It's very good for their careers as well. So if you're at a conference like this, things are going actually pretty well for you. You should be thankful to be there that you ended up in this industry.
I agree. So we talked about sort of folks looking like, how do I get started? We talked about folks that are kind of in the middle of that journey. Oftentimes, whether you're a small startup and you have kind of a chief engineer or lead engineer, or you're in a larger company that may have somebody in a role like you who are sort of looking on the horizon. If you're one of those folks in that kind of, I have these responsibilities today, but I'm here to be looking down the field 20, 30 yards, or meters. And, to folks like you in their respective roles, what should they be looking for at DevOps World? What kind of things should they be seeking out?
Yeah, I guess if it was me, I'd be curious for sort of the case study talks. They're always good. Sometimes they can be hit and miss, but if you don't like a talk, you can always leave out. And I also like talking to. It sounds weird. I like talking to the vendors. I like hearing the pitches and that. You can see what's a pitch and where the value is, and going around the booths and then just getting some ideas planted of what solutions might already be out there. So that's what I would tend to do, is sort of, it'd probably mostly be the conference floor is where I would find the value, the hallway track, as they call it. So yeah,
there's always interesting sessions you can scour in the catalog into. Like, that's kind of interesting. I haven't heard anything about that before. Let me go check.
That's right. Oh yeah, exactly. I've been to plenty of conferences where it's like, I have no idea what this is. I'll go to this talk and it's changed my life. Like, it's opened up a whole new field that I didn't realize existed. Like, often you don't know what you don't know. So it's, make the most of that. But yeah, that's really good.
Fantastic. Well, Michael, it's been great spending some time with you, and thanks for sharing your perspective, the longevity that you bring from your experience co-founding CloudBees and creating products in this area that bring, that's a unique perspective most people are not going to have, and I think it's super valuable. So folks, you can go to devopsworld.com, sign up. It's available now, 27th through the 29th. The full agenda is there. You can kind of scope out, map out. Here's where I want to go. Here's what I'm going to do there. Stuff I'm going to get out of it. And Orlando, Florida, not a bad place to be. That's pretty good too. Bring the family. Do some fun things.
Yeah.
In the off time, or send the kids off to wherever, and you go to the conference.
Yeah. Yeah. Work vacation. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, good. Thanks again, Michael. Michael Neal, Chief Scientist and co-founder with CloudBees. Thanks, Mike.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, I have the great pleasure of being joined today by Gopi Rabala. Gopi is CTO with OpsMX. Good to be talking with you, Gopi.
Nice speaking with you, Mitch.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about OpsMX.
Yeah, my name is Gopi Rabala. I'm the CTO of OpsMX. Our mission is to deliver software without human intervention. It's a little bit of a lofty goal, but what it actually means is we want to help not only automate the software delivery process end to end, but also help with the risk-making decision-making processes. So typically in a delivery process, there are multiple groups involved, and there is a handover, there is a friction. And we also make human decisions on the risk. Sometimes we deliver software with some vulnerability or some known issue. We want to be able to estimate the risk for it and help you make the decision and deliver software faster. So our intelligent software delivery platform essentially is geared towards that, automating the processes and the risk estimation, helping you make the delivery smoother with less friction.
Well, the conversation around software and security, DevSecOps, shift left, all of that it's almost a constant for me, at least. It seems like that's every day in some form or another. That's a conversation we're having. And if hopefully we're beyond, let's just shift it left and have the developers do security for us. I mean, they're fine people. They probably have enough to do to work instead of like putting that all on them. It's not scanning is, just scanning alone is probably not a solution in and of it by itself. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how do you approach DevSecOps and really kind of building in security into either the software, the process, or all of the above?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the way we see it is there are frictions because the security group has some requirements and the developers have different requirements or motivations are different. you want to be able to merge those two. We all agree that the delivering software faster, incrementally, provides a reliable delivery. And it's also for businesses, better feedback from the market so they can adjust. So delivering faster has its own risks with security. Okay? And we know with the small startups, the security, they try to step around it. And it's not uncommon to hear a delivery of, for a startup, getting $100,000 bill in a day because they deployed Tomcat with known vulnerability and somebody took over and ran Bitcoin mining. Right? We also hear the hospitals, for example, taken up by ransomware. In this environment, security needs to be treated as first-class citizen, of course. Now, how do you do that? You have the business needs, and the security becomes a primary need. And at the same time, how do you achieve the faster delivery? So that's where the DevSecOps, the model, adopting DevOps model to the security as well helps. You have multiple layers within the security, but what we are trying to do here with the DevSecOps is deliver software with security in place. So there are three things you should be able to do with this DevSecOps. Right? One is being able to integrate your security checks, either binary scans or pen testing or static code scans, all needs to be built in. And at the same time, there are policies that you need to be able to specify on top of these. So these policies, if you can do it declarative way, then the SecOps and the developers can agree on and use them in a common way with less friction. And most importantly, you want to be able to also have some governance capabilities and to enforce certain guardrails and gates within them. So once you have these, you have a framework that you can deliver secure software faster with less friction between different groups.
Several things I like about what you're saying, and one of them is it isn't just a point in time. It isn't at code check-in, then that's where we worry about security, or it isn't about when it's pushed into test, and then we do static analysis or security testing, SAST, but all the way through delivery, right? And thinking about getting the product out the door. And we all make compromises, right? What's enough security? Well, you can't have total security. So where do you draw the line? And maybe the line gets a little bit easier to draw, to your point, if that's built into the process, if it's automated and it's happening, and then with the manual steps when it needs to be, as opposed to let's stop and make sure that this gets done every whatever, once a week, once a month, a whatever. True?
That's exactly true. So usually the security group has their own requirements. They provide certain guidelines. At the same time, there is a skill gap with the developers or the experience gap in incorporating all those things in it. So if we provide them a way to have their processes built in with these security checks, the guardrails, then easier for them to adopt and then say, the development process includes the secure delivery as part of it. Then it becomes a cultural thing where simply they adopt the process, do the development as part of it. And then the security groups have a way of explaining or doing a policy as code that's easy to communicate between the groups. And you need to be also, these are all changing requirements all the time. It needs to be maintainable. And so that's why the policy as code or some way of declaratively specifying the policies is important to share between them. And it becomes a part of the life cycle of the software development. In the delivery process of your features, you incorporate your security checks end to end. This is a layered process, of course. The software itself needs to have the architecture that supports encrypted secure secrets stored and how they use it, encrypted in transfer, zero trust in updating, separation of duties. Those need to be there. And once you have those requirements, and then you specify the policies that one needs to adopt, you get a framework for end-to-end that's continuously checking for your security and helping you move forward.
It seems too that another benefit of it being end-to-end and being automated as part of the process is part of security too is also compliance, right? And we all love filling out reports and getting logs and whatever we have to do, right, to make folks happy, being sarcastic. But as much as that is automated or part of built into the process, there are artifacts created along the way. So I have logs, I have data, I have, oftentimes compliance isn't just applying what the policy is, it's demonstrating that we're following it, right? And that's a great way to do that.
Yeah. So there's essentially the advantages you get with this is being able to identify the vulnerabilities earlier in the cycle and also address the root cause of these vulnerabilities faster. So essentially secure software delivered faster. And like you mentioned, the compliance is a big requirement. What we see is there's a significant time that is spent after the fact in going and verifying the compliance of these processes. Even then, when the processes are set and they're all in place, some level of automation is there, there are handover that's happening. What we find is in organizations, when they go and do this audit and verify for the compliance, they always find exceptions because there is urgency that by the business that they easily sidestep these requirements and then go through. It's okay for sometimes, but you need to be able to immediately address that need and get to the secure point. So having that visibility end-to-end for all the groups, when the exceptions are taken, and how the processes are working, the feedback mechanism, that all needs to be there, the visibility, making the compliance easier. So this is a good way of adopting that processes to provide that compliance.
Fantastic. Certainly one of the things I've struggled with, and I think others too, is oftentimes the biggest challenge is how to get started, right? Where do you start? What's that journey look like? Yeah, help me out with some ideas so I know a path to go, or at least a path to start working from. What kind of recommendations might you have about either starting or as you're on your journey for DevSecOps?
Yeah, so the place we start with is how do we automate the process as a first step? Right? How do you incorporate the security checks out as part of your process? In the DevOps ecosystem, there are so many different tools that have to come in place. So you need to choose a tool that helps you get these integrations much easier, that has those integrations already, or has the ability to provide you these integrations and help you automate that process. Then the next step is look for a way of specifying policy as code. It's something that declarative. You don't want to have a software development done, it's opaque, and nobody understands what the policies are or maintainability changes. So select a tool that has the ability as a policy as code that you can apply on top of what you're automating that people can agree on. So once you have those, then it becomes a simpler providing a template to your organization or multiple templates that gives you 80% of the use cases for your organization, and it makes it easy for developers to adopt, easy for SecOps to specify what it needs to be, easy for ops to verify that the checks that need to be done are done, what they're running in their production is secure.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So automation, exposing what the policy is so people know what we're trying to achieve. Policy as code, of course.
And then having the visibility for the entire workflows.
Okay, very good. Well, tell us a little bit more about OpsMX. I know we're not doing a full conversation about all the things that you do. I imagine that you fit it well into this space. Tell us a little bit about that.
At OpsMX, we have this intelligent software delivery platform. So when I come from software development background originally, and then I moved to operations. It was a cultural shock.
It's a little different here.
It is definitely different. And the way they think about software reliability and the difference between how developers think about features and ops thinks about them is all different. Then when we started OpsMX, we initially worked with Netflix. Netflix had this Spinnaker as a software delivery platform. So we looked at that and we built our operations principles on top of Spinnaker, which we looked at where the frictions are. And so in this platform, that is when we integrated with large number of these DevOps tools, being able to get the data from all of them and then make it easy to apply these policies. We initially started playing with the machine learning to estimate the risk analysis. There are some places it fits well, some places the rules fit a lot better. So we then provide that ability to integrate easily, get all the data from these DevOps tools within the chain, automate the process, and then help them apply these rules. These rules can be in any different locations, right? You can specify the pen testing and then run through the results, and then policy that specifies these are the type of things that can pass. If they don't conform to that rules, they need to have approval from a team for them to pass to the next stage. We also put some machine learning capabilities at the deployment side. At the time of deployment, you can have progressive deployment strategies with the canary or the blue-green, where we automate some of these checks and using machine learning and then specify if the reliability of that is good or not. And then if it's perfect, you can go to production. If not, you can have a manual intervention. Somebody looks at it and then says yes or no. So that's the platform that we build, and we are helping our customers automate these to deliver things faster, get a lot more risk analysis into it. And clearly, because we are able to automate, we can provide the audit of all that is being delivered, including the exceptions.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, where can folks find out more? Do you have, I assume that you're a SaaS type delivery, cloud delivery? Do you have free online accounts? How can they check this out?
Yeah, we do have a SaaS delivery. We also have on-prem, but you can try out at opsmx.com, subscribe to our SaaS trial and check out all these features and see how they all fit in together.
Great. Sounds pretty easy, pretty painless. Well, it's very nice talking with you. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll come by as things kind of progress. It's like I said, it's a conversation that's happening in the boardroom and hallways, and the engineering design review and the security architecture discussion. Across the board, we're all working on how do we get better at this, and hopefully we can do that together to help.
Yeah, we are pretty excited being able to be in this area and bring these ideas forward. Very nice speaking with you, Mitch.
You bet. Check out opsmx.com, right?
That's right.
.com. Thank you much.
Thank you.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Richard Barreto, who's the CISO for Progress. We're going to be talking about the historic divide between cybersecurity, the business, and for that matter, the rest of IT, and what should be done about it. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This issue has plagued us for longer than anybody can remember, and frankly, security people are not always the most popular people within their organizations. Is the relationship between security and the business, and for that matter, even IT, starting to change for the better? And if so, why?
No, it definitely has changed over the years. I've been in security for 20 plus years, and I've seen it evolve where security was just a cost center, and now it's being recognized as an enabler to the business, and it has to align to the business.
And how is the business side viewing security differently? Are you feeling that those folks understand security or appreciate it more in the wake of, say, COVID-19 and digital business transformation initiatives? But is their mindset changing as well?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in high tech. And if you're, post or not even post, but during the pandemic, a lot of organizations started going through the digital transformation. And as you call it, or you could say, your digital footprint widens out on the internet. That just leaves more opportunity for hackers to either deface your website or disrupt your business, take it down. And so it definitely has changed. The attention from leaders, from the board, senior execs are now, I would say, understand security. It's an essential part of how they operate, and it has to align strategically with the business strategy.
We hear the phrase enabler a lot, and that's not always a good thing in certain contexts. So what's your sense of what does it mean for security teams to be an enabler of the business? How do you become one of those?
Yeah, it's a great question, because for me, it's if I can help the business secure their, we'll call it their environment, their network, the way they operate business, so that for our customers, especially enable trust, because the way I've always seen security, especially us being a software organization and providing services, we're an extension of any company and any of our customers. So they have to trust us. And if we can't give that confidence and that trust and the evidence of that trust, we're going to fail. Right? We need to be we need to be aligned with our business, our strategy, but also with our customers' needs. And obviously, security is becoming that much more important to the business and to our customers.
How do you do that in a world where everybody values speed and flexibility? And a lot of times security is viewed as getting in the way of those things. So how do you kind of strike that balance?
Yeah, it's been a journey to get there, to get that balance. But the great thing I would say about, especially with the technology now, is that cloud has enabled that to move us faster. The tools have enabled us to move faster. And when I mean faster, it means we can now weave and bake security through automation. And because now we have automation, it wasn't, we're not relying on humans, and humans will always be the weakest link in the chain for security. So if we can automate that and weave and bake security so that it becomes, part of the process, part of the design, and it doesn't have to be an afterthought where it becomes much more costly for any business, we've done a great thing.
Do you think that there's also shifting left of security responsibilities is also changing some of the relationships between security and developers and IT, and it's becoming more of a team sport? Are people receptive to that idea, or is that, tough sledding still?
Yeah, it's definitely a team sport. And they are receptive to it. Yeah, for the longest time, even security, even put engineers and developers on the side, even between IT, there was you would call tension between IT and security, and that's gotten better over the years. And now that's evolved beyond the IT team. It's now, with developers, even with the business and HR, legal. And so if we're not good partners, if we don't have good relationships, we're never going to achieve our common objective. And it is, I can't, so the way I always, when I talk to, especially engineers, they make more security decisions on a daily basis than I do as a security professional. And this is my main business, this is my main job and role. But they have hands on the keyboard, so they're constantly making security decisions. So it is my responsibility to be sure that they're equipped to make good security decisions, or not making decisions at all, because it's already baked into the process, and that will hopefully, especially through automation, will allow them to move faster.
It's hard to talk about automation these days without bringing up the fabulous concept of AI. We all think that somehow or other AI is going to save ourselves from ourselves, but what is the state of cybersecurity AI these days? What should we really expect?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's still developing. AI means different things to different people. There's definitely some, new technologies, especially a lot of startups coming up, specifically in the AI space. I don't know enough about it to say, like I'm an expert in it, but I'm definitely seeing some trends, and we've got to just be careful that eventually AI will be a major thing in our environment.
Do you think security people understand how business people think about risk? And I'm asking the question because if you go to business school from day one, they teach you that every decision you make involves evaluating some level of risk, and they strike a balance for that and move forward. And cybersecurity, from their perspective, is just one more type of risk. And do you think that security people, on the other hand, seem to view everything with, possible calamity is going to ensue any minute now? So, how do those two parties have that conversation about risk and talk about the same thing?
Yeah. So I've learned over my career that you got to live in the grays. Everything is black and white. And even in gray, there's shades of gray, right? It really depends on the business. It really depends on the individual. One of the toughest parts, as I was growing into this role and throughout my career is understanding what's tolerable to the business, right? From a risk perspective, like the concept of there's a vulnerability and it's exploitable, but then when you start to you start to decompose that and say, all right, well, what's the likelihood of that? How exposed is that to the internet? Is it attached to critical assets? And so when you start to have that conversation, decompose what risk is, like likelihood, impact, etc., you start to realize that there's certain risks you can live with, and like we do it all every day, in our daily lives. Like there's always a chance that someone's going to break in my house, or there's always a chance that someone's going to break into my car, or even get into my bank account. But you have to have certain controls in place that gives you comfort to try to reduce that risk. My job is to try to communicate that risk to the business so they understand, hey, here's the risk that we're living with. Also highlight the areas that we need to get better at risk, but also give them opportunities to make that risk tolerable for the business so that they feel comfortable that, we have our we'll call it prepared for any potential attacks or anything like that.
Are security teams kind of changing the way they evaluate risks accordingly? Because not too long ago, the motion was, here's a list of vulnerabilities in a spreadsheet, throw it over the wall, and you should fix all of these with any context as to what mattered, when, and why. And so surprisingly, nothing got done. Yeah, no, I went through that pain. It was it wasn't fun, and I didn't make good friends after that. You're absolutely right. I think what's missing is, so security tools are designed to do one thing: check if it's green, or check if it's red. Right? It's very binary. The thing that it's missing, and this is the art of a security professional, is you have to start to take in the context of the business. You have to start to take the context of the operations. We talk about how much we have to translate risk to the business, or security risk and technology risk to the business, but also same applies vice versa to technologists. We need to understand the business and the risk that they're taking, and how does that impact the technology and decisions that we make around building our systems. And so if you can do both and have, be that translator between both the business and technology, you're in a great spot. As noble as all this sounds, we are putting more at risk through digital business transformation initiatives, and the bad guys are getting smarter and launching more attacks with more sophistication. So what's your sense of, are we winning or losing? To tell you the truth, I think we're losing. I think we're losing because the difference between, so I started my career in the .com era, right? The sophistication and the resources and the investment to learn how to attack an environment or a business it's just crazy. It's exponential. It's like a hockey stick. And so, like, when I first started off early in my security career as a pen tester, the things that they're doing now today, especially with the tools that they have, is far beyond what I knew, what I was capable of doing. And for me to just learn some of the techniques and tactics that they're doing today would take me years to relearn. What we just, again, going back to your question, I think we're losing in a sense that we're now fighting against nation state. We're now fighting against, organized crimes. In the early 2000s, they may have existed, but not as big as it is today. There's definitely
an economy around cybersecurity, hacking, and threats. And how do you compete with that? And the only way we can compete against that is my job is to be able to defend my house as best as possible, to ship the most secure products as possible, but then also have good detection and response so that I can make it costlier for our attackers so that we become unattractive to attack.
Is perfect security attainable, or is that a pipe dream that we all have?
It is.
And part of this issue is instead of trying to achieve that goal, maybe we should just take a giant step back and say, we need reasonable security.
No, it's a pipe dream. It's like saying the world's free of crime. It does not exist. However, there's a certain, again, tolerance that we have to live with, and there's certain controls that we have to have in place that we just make it part of our daily living, right? Like we have locks on our doors, we have, security systems that are monitoring our environment. The same applies. There's no perfect. I think I forget who. I'm sure one security, a famous security leader or an executive said the best way to secure something is just unplug it from the internet. And even that, in my opinion, it's still hackable. Right, especially if you worked in aerospace defense.
There's a lot of folks who are dabbling in security. They get into it for a couple of years and then they burn out and leave. You've been at this for a while. What's your secret for longevity?
Yeah, that's a real thing. I've been sitting in a lot of roundtables lately, and one of the discussions that's coming up, more than often is burnout. Not just at the CISO, I think to your point is even security professionals. How do you again, we're fighting this fight, right? There's threats all the time. There's another Log4j, there's another SolarWinds. It's like you're firefighting all day. The key is, it's first of all, to get into this field, you have to love it. You have to be curious. You have to enjoy it. Because if it's just a job, a 9 to 5, you're going to burn out very quickly. But having good work-life balance, you're making sure that you keep, you balance the amount of work that you have, but also balance it with life and family. But you can't consume yourself into work. I think this just goes for everyone. But for me, if you enjoy your job, if you're passionate about it, that's great. But good work-life balance, good, like if you meditate, exercising, I love sports. So I'm a big tennis fan. So I play tennis at least once a week, and that helps me maintain. I'll try to get up early in the morning for a jog or do some cardio. That helps maintain that stress levels. And if you, it's all about, balance between mind, body, and spirit.
One of the issues, of course, is the bad guys got to be right once and the security people have to be right all the time. But do we need to change the definition of what winning is, because it's impossible to be right all the time? So do we need to cut security people a little bit of slack so they're not losing their minds?
Yeah. It's having a good conversation with the business, trying to be empathetic to them, but they also obviously have to be empathetic to us. And we're all trying to work with, everyone will say, yeah, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough resources. I have enough money. Well, you can have all the money in the world. You can have all the resources, but it doesn't, what's the true value there? So once you understand that value, and then you can really focus on exactly what type of time and resources and effort you have to put around security.
All right. Richard, would you tell your nieces and nephews or sons and daughters to get into this field?
Yes, I would. If they're curious, if they have, if they have an aptitude to it. Actually, I get a great story. My brother, he was a music DJ for 20 something years, traveled the world. I think by the time he was 20, he had seen the world 3 times. And so the pandemic really hurt his industry and hurt his source of income. And he came to me and he says, hey, I dabble a lot with technology, especially in in production, software and stuff like that. Do you think IT would be good? I was like, yeah, absolutely. I think you have the aptitude. You deal with applications all day. Why not? And then he started asking me questions about security. And then I was like, okay, all right. Don't do it because your brother does it. I want you to do it because you actually like it. And he goes, well, it's really cool about security that I see is that it's very community. It's a very tight community, and it's true. And it says it reminds him very much of the music industry. It's a very tight community. And lo and behold, he took a few tests. He got a job in IT, and now he's a cybersecurity engineer for a major company. And he's been doing it for the last, I would say, like 8 or 9 months, and he's enjoying every single moment of it. So I recommend it for anyone that enjoys it, enjoys a good challenge, if they're problem solvers, if they want to be creative. And it's a dynamic field, right? Like technology is constantly changing. So how do you keep up with those changes? And I think if you're a person who gets bored very easily, this is a great place to be. And security is not just, it's just not always technology. You can be in security sales, you can be in security business development, you can be in security training and awareness and education. And those are all great opportunities. And I sit on a nonprofit, and I'm trying to get the next level or next generation of security professionals, and hopefully, I hope that there's I can provide opportunities for those next generation of leaders.
All right. Well, maybe it's in the DNA. Hey, Richard, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mark Batchelor, who's CTO for 443ID. We're talking about open source intelligence as it applies to security and what's going on in the world. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've been doing some form of forensics forever and a day now with mixed results, but you guys are taking a little bit more of an open source approach to this. So what's the difference, and how will the result be any different than we've seen before?
Good question. So I wouldn't say we're taking an open source view of it per se. I'd say what we're really doing is we're taking what is already called open source intelligence, right? So if you were to think about what they define as open source intelligence, it's basically anything that's publicly available, that's legally obtainable, that you can use to do investigations on, right? And there have been companies that curate data like this for years. And lots of organizations use that data to run investigations to figure out the who behind what happened in a lot of cases, right? So you can think of social profile data, you can think of IP address data, data about email addresses that have been in breaches, things like have I been pwned and things like that, right? All considered open source data. If I've got enough of it, I can generally, or somebody can generally figure out who's behind it, what their tracks were, where they went. The federal government's been doing this for years, and it's ridiculously powerful when you have a lot of that data. And so what we're doing with that data is I'm a longtime identity security person. So I've been doing authentication and identity and access management for a long time. And my co-founder and I decided to start this company because we had both seen what you can do with open source intelligence, but nobody had really applied it to the IAM space or the authentication space in real time yet. It's still kind of been in the investigative world, so much, after the fact, right? So what we decided to do is say, look, all this data is available. Let's curate a bunch of it, some of our own. Let's, use some third-party providers and set it up in a real-time manner so that when somebody authenticates to something, we can make a relatively informed decision about that person before we've even collected any data in our own platform about them, right? So if I integrated my application to our application, I come with some baggage already, right? We've all got it. We've all been in breaches. We've all do certain things with IP addresses. We all exist in certain locations. So we've all got behaviors that are noted. And even the lack of having behavior is a behavior. right, is something to note. And so what we did is we created a real-time platform to harness some of that open source intelligence data that exists out there to provide scoring back to platforms so they can decide what to do next. Should they MFA the person? Should they run them through a full KYC process? That type of thing based off of how risky they look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, at its simplest level, if I am traveling, and let's say I'm in San Francisco and I have an IP address for that, there should be some activity online somewhere that correlates the fact that I am indeed in San Francisco, such as I checked in somewhere. And you can now capture that stuff in real time and kind of at least provide a higher degree of confidence in the fact that I am who I am.
You got it. And then to take it a step further, what we're developing as we march forward is the ability to create a general fingerprint for somebody that says, with some degree of accuracy, we'll never be 100% accurate because this is all based on sort of internet information, right? With some degree of accuracy, this is likely Michael, right? Because we've seen this behavior from him before. We know that he generally logs in this area from this ISP. This probably really is Michael. And if your fingerprint changes or your behavior changes, we can determine that this probably isn't Michael. You should probably ask for more stuff before you authenticate this person, right?
And what was the hard part about being able to do that in real time? Because all this data is out there and there's a bazillion APIs for collecting it. So what needed to happen on the back end to capture all that data and turn it into something actionable?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's kind of the gist of it really, is that back end, right? So we had to build a pretty robust data ingestion platform, right, that normalizes things. And then once it's normalized, sort of a caching mechanism to make sure that we aren't constantly calling out to third-party providers and things like that to get more data. But what we really were trying to set out to do with that back end was let people create, we call them policies, right? Let people create policies that tell us what level of risk they're willing to take for that particular login flow or registration flow or whatever happens to be. So we let them tune our policies so that the score that we give back is valid for what their use case is, right? And so the hard part about all that was kind of putting together an algorithm that would normalize all that and make it, for lack of a better term, kind of dumb it down to get it down to a single score, right? And so we wanted them to be able to influence our score, which is why we've got both sides of the equation there. We can influence scores. We can also give them all the derogatories about that person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the idea is that not everything has the same level of risk, and you don't really want to interrupt the customer experience too much for a low-level risk scenario versus something that's higher risk. And today, it seems like a lot of the policies we have in place are blunt instruments, so I can be a little more fine-grained approach.
Yeah, 100%. So the example I always give is, if I'm Twitter, I want more users. Do I care if they're bots? Kind of, but I still want more users. So I'd probably set up a policy that says, look, let more risky people in, right? I don't care as much if they're on a Tor exit node. I don't care if they're coming to me off of a VPN. I don't care if they're been in a lot of breaches because I want more users. Whereas I'm a bank, I don't want those users, right? I want actual people that have been KYC'd into my platform, right? So we let them kind of decide what they want to do with it, right? And it's always been one of the things about this type of data is that you haven't been able to influence. The facts are the facts, right? And so you've either been in breaches or you haven't. You've either recently been in a breach or you haven't. But I've never been able to kind of tune it to my use case to say, look, I don't really care about the breaches, but I do care if they've been on a Tor node, things like that, right?
Who has the sophistication in these organizations to make those kinds of evaluations? I mean, is it really part of, say, a digital transformation initiative, or is it a security team who's looking at this? Who's kind of waking up in the morning going, we need a better way of looking at this stuff in real time?
Yeah, so we're relatively new in the market and we're kind of still figuring out a bit of our fit, but I'll tell you where we've kind of a couple places where we're finding some uptake. IAM teams, so identity and access management teams, because they want to use our signals to perform adaptive MFA, right? So they're rolling out multi-factor authentication for their consumer platform or even internally. And one of the signals they'd like to curate is a bunch of open source intelligence. So they're using our score in some cases to decide whether or not someone should MFA, right? So we've kind of latched on to some of those types of projects. We've seen some uptake in sort of the SOC space, right? So people that are doing security audits that are running SOC centers for other companies. They're using us to report against user populations. So they take their users' population, they run it through our platform, they do a weekly report that says, here's all your risky users, right? And these people suddenly became risky and they weren't. You should probably do something about them, right? So we've been selling into security teams and IAM teams mainly today.
Is this becoming a bigger challenge? Because frankly, just more people are moving about these days. They're working from home. They're working everywhere in between the home and the office. And there isn't this real sense of consistency as to where anybody might be accessing any kind of service, whether it's consumer or B2B related.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why we started doing this. So you're familiar with user behavioral analytics, right? There's a bunch of companies out there that do UBA. And in general, UBA had been not relegated, but had been mostly focused on sort of internal activity, right? So, when do you open your email? When do you access this thing? When do you, what's normal for you, right? One of our premises was that on the internet, especially since everybody's remote now, what's the subset of that is interesting, right? So what IP address do you normally come from? What can we glean about your username or email address and your phone number, for example, if you're doing MFA or registering, right? Fed that data, can we do similar things that UBA does with less data? And we actually think we're pretty successful at it at this point. I like to call it UBA light. It's not really UBA light, but it's taking a subset of what they do to do the same thing. With everybody going remote, it actually opened the aperture up for us quite a bit, so that we could say, well, if you're in San Francisco today and tomorrow you're in New York City, that's entirely possible, right? That's not impossible travel. It becomes part of your attributes, right? So we come back later and we say, look, is it normal for you to be in New York City? Yeah, you've been there before. Is it normal for you to be in San Francisco? Yep, you've been there before. Is it normal for you to be in Las Vegas? Maybe not. And so now we ask for more authentication. Make sense?
Yeah. Is there a line here between that which is helpful and that which might be deemed creepy? I mean, do you have to kind of figure out, what exactly is the scenarios that you're trying to apply this in?
Without question, there's a line between that's useful and that's creepy. We're doing our best not to cross the creepy line. That's one of the reasons why we're only looking at those attributes that you would normally see, right? So email, IP, phone number, right? It's all readily available data. And yeah, it could be considered creepy. One of the things that I was always enamored with, now we're not doing this, but one of the things that I was always enamored with was the idea that ad tech companies could follow me all over the internet, so that they could sell me a pair of jeans, right? Hey, Mark likes jeans. He should show him ads for jeans, right? Now those companies only got to be right like 5% of the time or whatever it is in order for me to be happy with jeans. But the tech, I always thought you could do something interesting on the security side with something similar, without doing tracking, without playing the cat and mouse game of tracking cookies and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's what we're attempting to do here, is use similar concepts for security purposes.
Right. And if I get it right, it's viewed as helpful, and if I get it wrong, it's kind of viewed as the latest version of trying to spam me because of where I am, but I get the point. Hopefully, as we go along, do you think the average person is going to realize more and more about how much signals that they're generating and that people are able to track that? And, once people understand that, it becomes less creepy, right?
Yeah, it does. To your point, fact of the matter is everybody's generating a bunch of signals, and we're attempting to curate those signals so that we can make better security decisions, right? And curate them in a real-time manner, right? Is where we're attempting to go with this. So you're absolutely right, though. Everybody's going to make more signals over time, and we will only be messier as things go forward.
So what's the biggest challenge in setting all this up right now?
Biggest challenge, we spent a bunch of time on that back end. The data ingestion piece to make this thing real time had been challenging. We finally got there with it. We're very comfortable at this point with the kind of scale we can handle. That's been challenging. And the other piece that we don't know yet is sort of the regulation side of things, right? So, what do California data privacy laws do to us? What does GDPR do to us? We're pretty comfortable with where we are right now because of what we're collecting and how we collect it, but we don't know what regulation will do to us in the future either. Right. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that and the way to do it right versus doing it in a creepy way. Right. That's actually been quite challenging.
And to access this, I just need to call an API, or how do I actually feed this back into my systems?
Single API call today. It's a get score endpoint, and you pass us username and/or email /IP, and we'll run it, score it, give you back everything we know about it, and you make a decision. It's pretty simple.
All right.
Yep.
What do you think is the biggest issue that people are not appreciating about this right now? I mean, does the C-level really understand what's possible, or the security teams? Is it education up at that level, or do you think the rank and file get this as well? Who understands what can be done?
So I think that the security teams actually get this pretty well. And they have tools for this already, investigative tools for this. Most good security teams today that do sort of post-mortems on hack attempts and that kind of thing are already using tools from vendors that pour over open source intelligence to help them figure out who tried to hack them, right? All we've done is just take that and want to put it real time into their workflows, right? So they get it. I think CISOs understand it because they're already exposed to it, again, but not in a real time fashion. And the rank and file, I think services like Have I Been Pwned have been valuable for the rank and file. And so they can just go and find out how many breaches they've been in, for example. That service alone has brought a lot of insight into, wait a minute, if I just have my email out there, you can tell me exactly how many breaches I've been in. That's kind of scary, right? So I think the rank and file are starting to get it, and they will use, our platform and others to use adaptive MFA and various other things, KYC, right, based on their scores, right? So I think they're starting to get there. I don't think what we're doing is all that new per se. I think what we're doing is, in a novel way, we've turned something that's been around for a while into something that's real time.
All right, folks, like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. Hopefully our better angels will prevail. Hey, Mark, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I appreciate it.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews that allowed you to hear from some of the leading experts in the tech industry. We'll be back again tomorrow, so we hope to see you then. And in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for watching. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.